Hello everyone! Welcome to my channel. Please subscribe and keep watching more details. Today's shocking news. Ross Barton returns to Emmerdale, but not without tragedy. The sun had barely risen over the village of Emmerdale when whispers began to circulate. A familiar face, long gone, had been spotted near the woolpack, standing silently in front of the graveyard. It was Ross Barton. No one had expected to see him again. Certainly not this way. It had been years since Ross left the village, after the acid attack that changed his life. He had struggled with pain, trauma, and identity. He needed to disappear to rebuild himself. Most thought he'd moved abroad or started fresh under a new name. But today, Ross walked back into Emmerdale, with shadows under his eyes and grief written on his face. Moira Dingle was the first to see him. She dropped the basket of eggs she was carrying when he stepped out of the mist. "Ross," she gasped. He gave a weak smile, then broke down. Word spread like wildfire. Kane heard. Pete heard. Maddie was stunned. Debbie was shaken. Everyone gathered outside the pub, trying to piece together the mystery. But Ross wasn't back for a reunion. He was back because of death. "My son," he whispered when Moira pulled him inside the house and handed him a mug of tea. His hands were trembling so badly he could hardly hold it. "Son?" Moira blinked. "Ross, you have a child." Ross nodded. "Eli. He was 5. I raised him on my own. His mum, she left after the birth." Moira's breath caught in her throat. "He had a heart condition. We were in and out of hospitals. I did everything I could. But last week," Ross's voice cracked and tears began to fall. "He died in my arms." Silence fell over the room. The tough, reckless Ross Barton that everyone once knew had been broken by fatherhood and loss. Moira gently placed a hand on his arm. "Why come back here?" "Because I have nowhere else to go, and because this was the last place I ever felt like I had family." Ross stayed with Moira for a few days. The villagers were both welcoming and cautious. Some offered condolences. Others didn't know how to approach him. Pete, his brother, was hit hardest. He hadn't spoken to Ross in years, not since the bad blood between them had boiled over. But on the third day, Pete showed up at Moira's. He didn't knock, he walked straight in. "You could have told me," Pete said quietly. Ross stood, unable to meet his brother's gaze. "I didn't want to drag you into my mess." "You're not a mess," Pete replied. "You're my brother. And you just lost your son." They stood in silence before Pete reached out and pulled Ross into a hug that seemed to mend years of distance. But tragedy wasn't done with Emmerdale. The next morning, Ross collapsed outside the cafe. Brenda screamed. Sam rushed over. Ross was rushed to the hospital. Doctors diagnosed him with severe exhaustion and a possible infection he had ignored during the past weeks of grief and travel. But scans revealed something worse. He had a tumor near his spine. The doctors suspected it had been growing silently for some time. Ross didn't flinch when he heard the news. "I've already lost the most important thing in my life," he murmured. "What more can this world take?" But something changed in him. The news brought a strange kind of clarity. He chose to stay in Emmerdale, to fight. Not just the illness, but the emptiness that had consumed him. Debbie came to see him later that night. She hadn't said much since his return. She sat beside his hospital bed and held his hand. "You were always stubborn," she said, her voice soft. "So don't you dare give up now." He smiled weakly. "You still care." She nodded. "I never stopped." Outside the hospital, the Emmerdale community waited. The man who had once burned bridges now had people holding them together for him. Ross Barton's return was shocking, but it reminded everyone that even the most broken souls can find their way home.